So we're recording.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is April 11th meeting of the Joint Capital Planning Committee. And seeing we have a quorum, I am calling the meeting to order. And first calling on the members, so I made sure they can hear us and we can hear them. And this is important because we're conducting this meeting virtually. And I see Bridget has joined us. So I'll just call out names as I see them. And Lee has already told us, for those who joined late, that she's going to need to leave early. Lee.
I'm here briefly.
Bob.
Here.
Sarah.
Here.
Bridget.
Here.
And Hala.
Sorry, I'm not Bridget here. Hala.
Great. So I see that we're missing one person, but we've got today's agenda is to continue our discussion about recommendations we want to put in to our report to the town manager as recommendations, and reading what Sarah captured in Nat's excellent minutes captured. You got through most of the FY26 questions, and there was a few remaining discussion items that I think that is why fire department and police are with us, that Bridget has raised about FY26. And then on today, we'll, to the extent we can do it, look at the out years, the other 4 years, for any items we want to flag as to call into question, because we're running deficits in those years. And so we've been asked by at least the finance committee, but also the council, to see to the extent we can get nearer to a balance in the out years. We don't have to balance, so it's to flag them. And then the other item, at least on my list, is to the extent there is free cash that's extra at the end of the year when we close the books on the current year in the fall. We've been asked as JCPC to identify things that we think should be given priority for where the free cash might go. It doesn't necessarily mean those will be the priority, but not to just leave it to there's free money, where does it go? So those would be the two main items to talk about today. So that is where we are for today. And I believe, Melissa, the reason you have brought police and fire back is, Bridget, you had raised some questions about the expense of the communication system. You've looked at some other towns.
Yeah,
And just want to say just one thing for their benefit. Bridget was not a member of JCPC last year when we had a more thorough discussion about what this system is. So this is also for all of us to remember what it is, and then Bridget's, the questions that she raised by looking at some other towns.
Okay, perfect. And I just wanted to say to the people joining us today from the different departments that I'd done this for everything I wasn't certain about for the budget, but the rest of the committee was on board with the other one. So this one you have some support for, which is why you're here.
So I think the way to begin is just to talk a little bit about what is unique or different about the systems that we're bringing in and why they're so expensive, why it's more expensive than what you can see with a quick research and seeing what other towns have done in terms of their systems. So I see, and I'll just, anyone who's planning to speak, I see Gabe's hands are up. You're on.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention Officer Doug Geary, who is our administrative officer. He's also our fleet manager and has extensive knowledge in the radio system. He's trying to get in. I think he is.
Oh, okay.
He's in viewing mode, but not a panelist. I was wondering if we could let him in.
Okay, I don't see him in the attendees list. I just see 2 people there. So, Melissa, let me see whether, I don't have his email, but if he comes in on the general Zoom, please, we can promote him from attendees. He can't come in on your specific invite because that's unique to you. I don't think he can. Melissa, I don't know whether we can, I don't have his email, so I can't send anything
It
to him.
should be Geary D. So GEARYD@amherstma.gov.
You grab the link off the calendar.
Yeah, it's on the calendar. I'll have to grab the link. Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. Okay. It'll take, and I see Lindsay's
I
hands.
just sent him the email.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
So Lindsay, do you want to jump in while we're waiting for him to join, or
Sure.
as I said, in any order that makes sense to you? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Lindsey Strongman, Fire Chief. Yeah, I think I'm prepared to make the bulk of the explanation. I've talked to Chief Ting. So I want to start by giving a little background. So like you said, there are some members who were not here last year. So I am going to take a minute to talk about the overall project, and then me and Chief Ting can speak about the cost questions. This project was originally proposed as one project a couple years ago. A year and a half ago, we met with Sandy Pooler, who was doing finance at the time, and he actually suggested we split it into two parts. So the literature, I think you should all have in front of you about the two different phases, that it was put together under his suggestion to break this project up because it was a fairly significant dollar amount. So the way we broke it up was into what we call the infrastructure, which was phase one that was funded for FY25. And then phase two, which we're here now for FY26. Phase one is what we call the infrastructure, which is really the backbone of the radio system. It's all of your base stations, antennas, etc. Phase two is, in technical terms, what's called the subscriber units. It's really the mobiles and portable radios that the firefighters and police have in their vehicles and carry around. Doug Geary, who you're trying to get into the meeting, was the reference from the police department. He knows what the police department needs. So he and I actually put this project together. We went to Goosetown Communications a year and a half ago. They did a study, analyzed our system, told us what would be the best way to go about this. And when I say best, I'm not talking about the top of the line, every bell and whistle. It's what would improve our communications in the field for police and fire, because both agencies do have dead spots. And do that in the most cost-effective way. So Goosetown did a study, which I think was forwarded to all of you. And that's where this project came about, that was then split into two parts. And the best way I can give you an analogy, it's not a perfect analogy, but if everybody's familiar with cell phones, the infrastructure, which was funded for FY25, is essentially your carrier. It's the system that's out there. You have your choice of systems. They'll all do roughly the same thing. Some are better than others in different places. So that's the system. And then regardless of who you have, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, you can go out and buy an iPhone, an Android, a Motorola phone, whatever. Those are what we're talking about for phase two here, the subscriber units, the actual portables or mobile radios. So we've already in FY25 been funded for the carrier, if you will, the actual radio system, the infrastructure. That project is underway. So if it's not a question really at this point whether we want to design a different system, that train left the station a year and a half ago. It's been funded for FY25, and we're moving forward with that. This phase two that's before you now is again for all the portables and mobiles. And Melissa, am I able to share if I click on this?
I
Find out.
hope so.
Okay.
Are you?
Yep. Can you see this?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Nope.
No,
Did you have to give them permission to share?
it's not a big deal if we can't do it. I just figured it would help give a visual.
There.
Let me
As
try
a
it again.
co-host, I think you can do it.
Whoop.
Is it possible, Chief Ting, that
What?
Doug is
here it
logged
is.
in on
No, no,
Kathy's
no,
computer?
no.
That's correct.
There-
His,
there-
his wife is Kathy, so
Okay.
he's
Okay.
using her name. So it's listed as an attendee. If you could let him in, that'd be great.
Okay,
Okay, so yeah, everybody can see this picture now.
Yes.
yes,
So I'm actually in Indianapolis right now at a trade show for the fire service. It's an educational and trade show. So this photo is literally taken yesterday. because all the different vendors are here on the show. And I took this photo because this is what they're selling right now. This brand happens to be Kenwood. The green item right here is a portable radio. This is what the police officers and the firefighters carry day to day on their person. And this is a mobile radio, which would be in the police cruiser, fire truck, ambulance, chief's vehicle, etc. So again, phase one is all the base stations, everything you don't see that's in the background, and that's moving forward now. This phase two is to buy X number of these mobiles and X number of these portables for the firefighters and for the police officers to work with the new infrastructure that we're putting in place. And without getting too technical, well, I'm happy to answer questions. These are what are called tri-band radios. So they have VHF, UHF 800 megahertz. The reason for that is interoperability, not only between the police and fire departments right here in Amherst, but to also be able to talk to the UMass Police Department, who's a different system, to be able to talk to the Franklin County towns, both police and fire, because they're on a statewide 800 megahertz system, and all of our surrounding communities. So these radios actually, and this will tie into my comments about cost, are actually three radios in one. They're VHF radios, they're 800 megahertz radios, and they're UHF radios. So we can talk to all of our mutual aid partners in the area. So what's before you now is essentially to buy, like I said, a certain number of mobiles and a certain number of portables for both the police and fire departments. These radios that you're seeing now are Kenwood's. Historically, our community up until now has been a Motorola community. Doug Geary likes Motorola. I like Motorola, but I'm going to be very honest, they've priced themselves out of the market. Kenwood's, which you're looking at here, are about 20% cheaper. So we are actually looking at getting Kenwood's because we are, conscientious of the ultimate cost of this project. So we have made a decision to take about 20% off by going to the Kenwood line versus the Motorola line. In terms of the overall cost of the project, I think the communities that were looked at, there is no apples to apples comparison. You really have to look at what each community has done. I reached out to the Northampton Fire Chief. Chief Ting reached out to Northampton Police and South Hadley Police. And what we found is an example of South Hadley. Their system, I don't know what the cost of that was, but their most recent upgrade was for police only. It did not include the fire department. And looking at their rough numbers, it was about a third to a half the number of physical radios that you're looking at right here. To give you a different comparison, I think Northampton, in terms of the community size and makeup, is very more comparable to us. They are actually in the final phases of a radio system upgrade, and that's coming in at $7 million. Now, to be fair, that is not only police fire, it's also school and DPW. It's a town-wide system, but that community is putting forward $7 million to put roughly these same portables and mobiles into the vehicles and the firefighter police officers' hands as we are, but obviously at a much higher price tag. They're going to an 800 megahertz system, which is partially why they're more expensive, and I believe they're staying with Motorola versus going with the Kenwood. Chief Ting, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add about the cost. I know you got a lot of data from Chief Gunderson in South Hadley, and I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, I would love for Doug Geary to chime in. He knows a lot more about this than I do. He's our resident expert. If you don't mind, Doug.
Sure. Sorry for the late join. I was having some technical difficulties. Yeah, I will second what Lindsay said. Our system is definitely unique compared to other communities. Something that we also, our system is a little bit different. We actually have two channels that we operate on. We operate on a regular primary frequency that allows us to work with our dispatch center to deal with everyday calls and traffic. And then we actually have a secondary channel that allows us to do special events and not take over our main frequency for those special events, so that the standard calls for service aren't interrupted by that radio traffic that would be associated with the special operation. So we actually have two frequencies that we use where the fire department has one. So we're actually kind of double that amount. We added that to our system probably about 15 years ago because we were having too much radio traffic. So that was a great addition to us later. So things like the Blarney Blowout, we've had these half marathon races where we've used it. Some of our detail officers use that channel so they don't conflict with primary dispatch functions. So that really alleviated a lot of our problems with too much radio communication on one frequency. So that's one of the not the issues, but one of the costs associated with upgrading our system. I'm not sure if Lindsay mentioned it too, but back probably 10, 15 years ago too, the FCC mandated that we had to go from a wideband frequency position to a narrowband frequency position, which was basically across the whole United States. The FCC wanted to increase the amount of frequencies available to public safety, and by doing that, they basically took our wide frequency and squeezed it down to a narrow frequency, which had some significant performance issues. Wideband kind of goes, when it transmits, it kind of floods an area, where now narrowband kind of goes in and is very particular. So we have some known dead spots in our town. And when they went to narrowband, it actually made the dead spots even worse and created some new ones. So I know fire, as well as us, we have very difficult transmissions down on University Drive in the Northampton Road area. We have some difficulty in the Belchertown Road area out by Logtown Road, that area. So basically, we have a single transmit site, which is on the top of Impelum, on top of Mount Lincoln. And because of that high prospect, when it shoots down, it doesn't go into the little valleys and the dips. So it shoots over the top of it. So we're definitely having some poor radio issues, and we've lived with it, knowing that hopefully this new project would come to fruition and we could eliminate those problems. And because of that single transmit site we have on Mount Lincoln, all these new systems are called simulcast systems. So they have multiple transmit sites in different locations. So when it transmits, it all comes into from different directions as opposed to just one direction. And if you look at South Hadley, they did that with 4 sites. I'm sure Northampton's got multiple sites. I'm not sure about some of the other systems, but we're basically bringing our communication systems up to current levels where we have operated with the same system design since when I first started in '94, and I'm sure Lindsay could support the fact of how old our system design is. So therefore, this is why our request is probably a little bit higher than the average, because we have not really done anything significant to our system in over 30 years. I don't know, Lindsay, if you can add any more to that.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add, I'm going to share my screen again. I neglected to mention this earlier when we were looking at these actual devices, just to give people an idea of what we're talking about. These portable radios are running about for the Motorola pricing, are about $8,000 to $9,000 and close to $10,000 per unit. And these mobile radios are about $10,000 per unit. And I know those prices sound astronomical because they are, but that's what they cost these days. So when you say just 10 of these radios for 10 cruisers, that's $100,000 right there. So you can see why the cost is what it is that we're asking for this year for the 1.1 million, because just 10 of these is $100,000. And the reason they're so expensive is because I mentioned earlier, they are really 3 radios in one. If we were doing these radios 10, 15 years ago, we would and did have a separate radio for VHF, a separate radio for UHF, and a separate radio for 800 megahertz when that came into being in the area. So we would have had 3 separate radios. Now they're putting them all into one, but that raises the cost, right? There's really 3 separate radios built into that small package, and they're also obviously designed for public safety use. Those portable radios get brought into fires, literally, with the firefighters, and they live a pretty rough life out there. So they're military spec for being drop, water, et cetera. So when we talk about the cost, you know, when we're talking about $9,000 to $10,000 per piece, you can see where that total of $1 million plus comes from.
Thank you very much. So I'm seeing Sarah's hand is up, and any other, thank you for joining us. So this was a great presentation. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. And for the refresher, because it's been a while. So the die has been cast, I gather, because the infrastructure, sort of all the ground permanently installed infrastructure is I don't know, it's on order, or you're installing it, or what. But it sounds like a lot of the expense is because of wanting to operate on 3 frequencies. And I wonder if the next time, is there a move, would Amherst move towards the statewide frequency, the 800 megahertz or whatever it is the university is on that? I mean, would it not be more efficient, or at least in terms of cost, to eventually be operating on one band, or is there too much traffic? You need to spread out the traffic into multiple bands. That's one question. And the second is, so is this budget, your request, given what you've learned at this trade show or whatever, is it going to be adequate, assuming it's approved? Will it buy what you need?
Sure, I'm happy to answer both those questions. In terms of the statewide system, I guess I can only partially answer it. I can't look into the future too far. What I can tell you is right now where we are in Hampshire County, there really isn't a statewide system in place to do what they're doing in Franklin County. That's not to say that it won't be there in the future. So UMass is on their own system. They're completely separate. They have their own, I think it's about a $1 million system they put in 5, 6, 7 years ago. Franklin County has been on a statewide, has had their own system countywide for 20 plus years. They just went on the state police system in the last 3, 4 years. Whether that's available to us in 5, 10 years, I can't say for sure. I can tell you right now, it is not built out, does not have the capacity that you brought up to do that right here in this area. That's not to say it won't be there in the future. In terms of, is this enough for now, to do the job? I would say the design is there. I'll be very honest, costs are skyrocketing on everything, as I'm sure you know. We already raised this phase 2 a little bit from what was showing last year because of the cost of the devices I showed you, the portables and mobile radios. That's certainly cemented in our minds that we were going to go to the Kenwood line of items versus the Motorola because, again, those are about 20% less expensive, but they do the same job. I have no concern about that. So in terms of buying the portables and mobiles, this phase 2 will certainly be enough to do what we need to do right now. For the phase 1, we are running into some overages cost-wise. We're going to have to scale that back a little bit and then finally build out the last piece of that in the future. But it is still going to give us a much better system than what we're working with right now.
Bridget?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for explaining it. And wow, you do have a lot of coordination. I can see that maybe other communities wouldn't have as much. The UMass piece just alone explaining that helps understand a bit. I had 2 questions that are still outstanding. I noticed a lot of the other towns, Granby and Northampton, had to take theirs out to bid. And did we do that? Is like we're locked into this one? That's the deal. And the second one was some of the grants for the state were related to regionalization, but then there's support grants. And I wondered if we'd applied for any of those.
Sure. In terms of grants, we have looked at grants. We haven't applied for any for radios that we haven't received. We simply haven't applied to try to put money. There are no specific grants for radios. You talk about regionalization, and that's a separate thought process discussion, if you will. There are some smaller communities that are banding together in a regional format. Amherst actually tried to start that project about 15, 20 years ago. And it ultimately didn't go anywhere. And we're really a big enough community now that it's not something that anybody has looked at. Not to say again, that couldn't be done in the future. So there are no grants for us for the regionalization piece of it or support unless we were going to obviously regionalize. We have brought in about $500,000 in the last 15 months just for the fire department for grants, but we did not put in for radios. When we apply for grants, some of them are very specific for things. Some are a little more open. You could put in for radios, but we always look at what can we get with this grant and what is the likelihood of us getting the grant. And so we have not put in for radios because the cost of this project being what it is for police fire combined and the price tag, we didn't think it was a high probability we would get the grant. So we chose to put in for a grant for something that we would likely get. And we actually did get it. I'm proud to say we have not had any grants turned down in the last 2 years. Every grant we've applied for, we've actually received. And that's totally just for us. I don't know about the police, but for fire, about $500,000. So no, we haven't put in for grants. And that's why, because I don't think we would be successful. First of all, that dollar amount isn't available and I'm not sure we would be successful. In terms of, you asked something about, are we locked in bidding? So for the phase 2, buying the devices, those are straight up equipment off a state bid. So we would not have to go out to bid for those. We would just buy them through our vendor. We already have quotes from them. For the infrastructure phase that we're in now, we are stalled on that slightly because that is on the state bid, but there's some discussion going on with accounting that it actually falls under a construction line, which means it would have to go out to bid. So we're actually working that through with accounting right now.
So I see Bob and Melissa's hand are up.
Go ahead, Melissa.
I just wanted to remind the committee to Lindsay's point, and I can't speak to all the grants that he's done, but as part of the capital that was submitted by the fire department, one of his lines was reduced because of grant funding that they had. So I just wanted to kind of say that he was being selective in that, and you saw the value of that this year.
I just wanted to ask how long this equipment will last. In other words, when are we going to see another request for either the mobile units or the base units?
Typical lifespan is 15 to 20 years, end of life. We do have some newer radios in our departments. The vast majority, certainly what I have in the fire department, for mobiles and portables are at the 20-year mark or plus, and they're what the manufacturer calls end of life, so they won't fix them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say the same thing for police. We have some newer radios also, but they're probably 10 years old now, and we have a lot of support radios after that, which are 20 to 30 years plus old too. Same end of life issue. But again, the focus on these new mobiles and portables, which I agree with Lindsay, it's a 15 to 20 years, but I'm sure we probably get 25 years minimum out of them. The interoperability component is the most important piece here, is that we're able to interact with our mutual aid partners, UMass, Hadley, Sunderland, all the neighboring communities, because right now we do not have that capability. And everything has to either go through dispatch, 2 or 3 hands through dispatch, through other dispatch centers, or we're listening to scanners. And with that being said, you're fighting to listen to a scanner and your own radio at the same time, where an interop radios give the ability to manage that traffic much better.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing us into the world of radios for police and fire in a complicated community. Steve, go on. Stephen, yeah.
Thank you. Just quickly, I just reiterate Doug's message there. I feel very confident saying that we run a well-oiled operation between the police and fire in Amherst. In fact, it's almost, the relationship is almost unheard of compared to other agencies, other communities in the Commonwealth. And part of it is our ability to communicate and work together And when we're all going to single incidents at the same time, it is really key to be able to talk to and hear the other agency and know what's going on. It's one of those traits of our community, right? We all work with limited resources, and we continue to get it done. This makes it a safer world. It makes our response even faster because we'll hear what the police are saying, they'll hear what we're doing, and we'll be able to talk to them directly. So it really is a key to making this operation continue to work and grow with the hazards that we face. And you know, people, you know, I'm with the chief at this conference, and you know, we sat there and listened to people talk about real critical incidents in communities. Faced with those critical incidents, there's nothing more important than communications. And so this is really a key to our operation. The other thing is I'm actually very much a fan of numbers and data, and I read some of the information provided, like the Wellesley, because I have friends that work in Wellesley, and I wanted to see, well, what does their radio look like? Just to know, the Wellesley request is interesting, but it's more of a workstation at the dispatch center request. It doesn't actually encompass some of the breadth and the depth of the project that we have. But another interesting thing in the Wellesley project is that they have a Zetron fire station alerting system at about $435,000 on a separate request. Comparable, we actually had a $70,000 request for a station alerting system that was kind of led towards your committee, but was deferred early on in the process. But I think when you look at different communities and different projects, it's very interesting, and I appreciate the data. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bridget was our researcher on this. Thank you, Bridget. So I see Jason's hand is up, so.
Yeah, just to bring up the point, for those who don't know me, I'm Jason Rushford. I manage the dispatch center here in Amherst. The grant funding that is available to communication centers are limited to individual PSAPs or 911 answering points. There is money available for interoperability in radios. However, like the chief said, you have to be regional to obtain that money. So we couldn't even apply for it on the 911 side of things if we wanted to. I do apply for the support and incentive grant. We get about $170,000 a year for that to offset some of our salaries. But there is no caveat for the radios in there unless we go regional or in the process of developing a regional system. So that has been looked down for that road to go down for saving money, but it's just not applicable to us right now.
Thank you. And Sarah.
Yeah, just a comment about the importance of the interoperability. I think I remember that lack of interoperability was a huge problem during 9/11, that the first responders in Manhattan were just not able to communicate with each other very effectively. And maybe it was that has driven this recognition and move towards systems that allow this interoperability. Hugely important.
Yeah, I would add you're 100% correct about that. And a big push in the industry now since 9/11. And they've made a lot. Back then, it was a technical challenge, to be honest. They hadn't really worked out the technical side of it. Like I said, we used to have 3 different radios in our trucks for all the different bands. I won't say completely, but by and large, they've solved the technical challenges, although it's expensive. And now it's really on communities to buy into that technology. Much more recently, if you remember the gas explosions, fires in Eastern Massachusetts, about wherever that was, right before the pandemic, Lawrence, I believe.
Oh, Everett?
Yeah, I believe, yes, yeah. So
Oh, Lord, yeah.
I only bring that up because they were bringing in fire departments, not from all over the state and from other states down from Vermont, New Hampshire. And they once again ran into interoperability problems because some communities had bought into it and some had not. So it continues to be a challenge nationally, and we've made slow inroads on it. But this radio system upgrade puts, as I said earlier, tri-band radios into every vehicle in the hands of the firefighters and the police and the dispatch center. So it largely eliminates that issue.
I just wanted to say that in a previous life, I did a lot of consulting work to the federal government. And when the Department of Homeland Security was formed after 9/11, they had a huge interoperability problem with all their different agencies. They all operated on different systems, and it was just a big mess for the federal government to struggle with. So I can understand that it's a real problem.
So I'm not seeing any other hands up. And as I said at the beginning, I thank you so much for joining us as a team. We'll make sure we have really good minutes on this. So if in the future anyone asks us, why is the system as expensive, we'll have pieces. And that picture was very helpful, to see, we're talking about something much more than a handheld cell phone, on
Right.
the way we communicate with each other. And
Yeah, they
often
don't
don't.
give, yeah, they don't give you the radios for $1 if you sign up.
That's right. So I think that's it in terms of this piece. Bridget, you had some other questions about longevity of vehicles, but I think for right now, there's only 2 we're purchasing this year. So I would like to come back to that because it's a larger issue across all vehicles, unless you want to take it up now.
Well, I mean, I think we have a guest appearance now in the regarding the fleet at the police department. Might be your last chance.
So, the question really was, can they go longer in terms of 100,000 miles, 200? You're looking across different vehicles, wasn't it? Is that the short summary of your question, Bridget?
Yeah, and I mean, more than anything, I think it's just about like having some sort of fair uniform policy between departments and as a vehicle policy overall. I think, as opposed to I think there's a 2012 that makes sense to replace, but if you go down the big vehicle sheet, there's such disparity between departments, even on other daily use. And I know our ambulance, they told us that was comparable, but that went to 200,000 miles. So I guess my big question is just, like I mentioned in the first meeting, you don't want to buy someone ice cream and not someone else in the same, system. And I still have questions on that. And then, why are other towns getting their vehicles for so much less?
Okay, I can address those issues. So yes, in regards to fleet vehicles. So we do have a lot of vehicles that are currently listed as good or even excellent. We went, obviously, during the COVID year, I think that was 2021, nobody received any vehicles in town. So even when that year came and we didn't have any replacement vehicles, we still had to drive those same vehicles. So they did drive higher, but the problem is that our vehicles are driven with some intensity, obviously emergency calls. I kind of don't agree with the issue that our vehicles are similar to ambulances. Those ambulances are trucks, commercial rated trucks. Ours are still passenger vehicles with some minor changes for a heavier duty use. So they're covered under the Ford. We buy Fords, and they're basically Ford Explorers, but they call them police interceptors because they're fit to sustain police use. But they do take the wear and tear that your same car does. We hit the same potholes. We jump curbs sometimes when we have to. Guys are driving them a lot more intensely to get to emergency calls, whether it be a medical call, a disturbance call, a fight in progress call, assisting the fire department with a house fire call. So they're driven very, very I wouldn't call it aggressively, but they're driven different than the school bus drivers driving the school bus. They are built better than they have been in the past, but the only problem is you run into reliability issues. And I was reading the notes that was taken here, and somebody wrote in there convenience, and I wasn't really sure what convenience meant, but it'd be convenient if your car was able to show up to the call, an emergency call, whether it's a motor vehicle accident or a child choking or something related to that. We have had 3 or 4 instances in the last few years where some of our cars that were in excess of 100,000 miles broke down en route to these calls. And that, as a police officer, that is the terrible feeling that you're so close to getting to a call, but your car can't make it there. And it's really inexcusable for public safety. You have to have a reliable vehicle. And I guess what we talk about is reliability on these vehicles. Like, we continue to do all the scheduled maintenance, all the repairs that are needed. But the problem is once those vehicles become unreliable because you don't know what component of that car is going to fail, that's when you start having some really bad concerns about how well your fleet is. So right now our patrol fleet is pretty well done. We put in requests for vehicles, and during COVID, everything, as we know, came to a stop. So we had requests for vehicles, and it took me over 1.5 to 2 years to get some of these replacement vehicles. So a lot of our cars are 2023s, but we have some of their 2012s. There's a 2016, there's a 2017, and they're all in excess of 120 to 130,000 miles right now. So now we're getting into this issue of reliability. And I know we requested 4 vehicles this year. I think there was some conversation to reduce that down to 2. I can understand the cutting measures, but still, these vehicles need to be replaced for reliability issues. And obviously the costs associated with maintaining them are going to be a lot higher because they're out of warranty. So everything that we have to do to those in repair, not just maintenance and upkeep, but repairs, are going to be high cost figures because they're major things like transmissions, drivetrains, front suspension, rear suspension, because like I said, these cars are driven almost every day and they take the wear and tear, where a school bus goes out twice a day, only 5 days a week. Goes in the morning, goes in the afternoon, and then it's not going anywhere on the weekend. So the amount of use our vehicles get is substantial compared to some of these other town vehicles. And I get all fairness. I'm not about not being fair. I just don't want us to be in a situation where our police officers are responding to a call and they can't make it there. Number one, get there safely, and that they don't have a failure where it's going to cost the officer to be injured because of some sort of failure. And 2, that they get there to do what they're trained to do, whether help somebody, protect somebody, or what have you. So our cost of our vehicles, so I noticed in the notes too that, let me just refer to this real quick. Back in 2020, the town council passed that 10-year capital improvement plan, and the police vehicles were budgeted for 2019 at $40,000. Now, in 2019 was the last model year before Ford changed their design from one Ford Explorer to a new Ford Explorer. So they changed the look. So when they changed that look, all the equipment from the previous vehicles could not go into the new ones because the specifications and measurements of the new vehicles weren't the same as the old vehicles. So I couldn't take equipment from one car and put it on another because it didn't fit. You had to buy new stuff. So the reason why these prices are higher is because we're replacing all these cars that are the new style with the equipment that fits it. 2, we decided at the town's obviously liking that we went to hybrid vehicles. So the hybrid costs for these vehicles were $7,000 to $8,000 more than the standard gas vehicle. Now that price has started to come a little bit closer now. The gas is I think $2,200 to $2,500 cheaper than a hybrid vehicle. So that's where that expanded cost was. And with COVID, prices shot up for not only the vehicles, but also the aftermarket equipment. So if you look at somewhere, someone said on here that Northampton was spending $67,000. We actually reached out to them. They requested $92,000, and that's what their city gave them, plus an additional $10,000 for radio equipment. South Hadley, someone said $55,000. It's actually, they requested 85. They only got 80, and they're struggling to meet their requirements with the 80,000. These cars are so full of technical equipment now, between radios, in-car video systems, and emergency lighting and all sorts of other safety features built into the car. The prices are that high. So I'm guessing after we make probably this year's fiscal year and next year's fiscal year replacements, the cost is going to come down because now I'm going to be able to move some of the similar equipment currently in these new vehicles into the next new vehicles because they're probably going to be the same model specifications. Every time that Ford decides they want to change the look of a vehicle for the public to have a nice new looking different vehicle, it changes it on the police side too, which is a tough thing for us to swallow because we have to come up with that money to buy the equipment that fits those new specifications. Just looking at my notes here real quick. I'm kind of curious to see how these new hybrid cars last. I think our oldest one is a 2021 right now, and it's probably around 80,000 miles. So we're kind of curious to see how it maintains itself going close to 100,000. If at 100,000 things look like they're going to last longer than the standard gas vehicles of the teen years, we might be able to keep them longer, but we're not there yet to really prove to see if it actually happens. But definitely open to that idea of trying to keep some cars a little bit longer. Again, I don't know what the maintenance costs or the repair costs are going to be. These are first generation hybrid police vehicles. So I don't know what the battery life's going to be like, if it's going to be still efficient anymore. So those are things that we're going to have to figure out down the road in the next few years. But right now, we're still replacing gas only police vehicles with new hybrid technology. So I'd say after this year and next year, basically our whole fleet will be hybrid, which was the goal of obviously the green communities efforts here to get totally green sustainable on police vehicles. And we are starting to toy with the idea of trying to find a fully electric vehicle. If we were going to do 4 cars this year, we were actually going to replace one of the cruisers with a full electric vehicle and give it a try. But if we're going down to 2, we're only going to be able to replace 2 gas vehicles with 2 standard hybrid vehicles. Did I answer all your questions so far? I don't want to miss anything.
I think so. I'm seeing Chief Ting's hand is up as well. I think one of the issues is that a car, a truck, and a police car are not all the same, in terms of how they're used and what goes into them as equipment.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, that's definitely an issue. I mean, if you're more than welcome to anyone wants to come down to our police department and take a look at what goes into these vehicles. We can show you exactly the technology that's in there and the specialized equipment that goes in there for obviously our communications, our safety, transporting prisoners, transporting equipment. It's very unique. When I first started doing this, it used to take 1 day to build a police car at the company that we use to upfit a car. Now it takes over 5 to 6 days to build 1 police car. That's how intense the equipment installation is these days.
Chief Ting?
Yeah, so I just want to mention that our police vehicles are considered as essential equipment. I would consider those to be the offices for our officers because they're being used 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So these vehicles are shared amongst all of the patrol officers. And so therefore, there's no consistency in driver usage. And these are really hard miles that are being driven. That's the reason we only use vehicles that are considered as patrol rated. I've heard in the past, they're a little bit more robust and heavier duty. I've heard somebody recommend in the past, why can't we just buy a civilian model, a Honda or something like that for 45,000 miles, for $45,000? And it's just not possible. So we also maintain a high standard of service at APD. We respond to over an average, let's say 20,000 calls for service and motor vehicle stops annually. So we only have 3 patrol officers and 1 supervisor on the road. And as first responders, we truly, Doug has already mentioned this, we truly cannot afford for a vehicle to break down and delay any type of response. Many of our calls are for medical reasons, motor vehicle crashes or citizens that are in some type of danger. So for someone in our community to potentially get hurt because our vehicles break down is just simply unacceptable. Also, I wanted to mention that, for the past 10 years, since I've been in a leadership position, the budget for our operating costs, APD, have been level funded every year. Within each year, even with the rising costs across the board, we try to find a way to make things work. We've been extremely responsible fiscally. The only two areas that we cannot cut corners on are our training budget and our necessary equipment. And police cruisers is probably the most important tool that we have. It's the only piece of equipment that is used at every moment of every day. Even after we had 2 positions frozen out to help out another department, we find a way to make it work. So I don't think we should be penalized for other departments that haven't fared as well. We really do try to be fiscally responsible, and this is just a real necessary tool for us. I don't know if Ron Young has anything to add to that. If you're there, Ronnie?
I am here, Chief. I don't really think I have anything to add. I think that puts it pretty succinctly. Pardon me.
Thank you.
And I want to
That's
thank
all I
you
have.
all. I want to thank you all for responding to questions that were raised and for joining us today. It's a good showing of the commitment to the town and to serving all of us well. So I think I'm not seeing any other hands, so I do think we will write up these notes, and to the extent JCPC keeps having new people every year, we'll try to make sure we keep notes of discussion. So to the extent you come back and have another set of us, we can at least read what the last group heard. Because it's something we just don't see every day. And we're certainly not on the purchasing end. So I'm not seeing any hands up at the committee. So I think we can thank all of you from fire and police for joining us today for this extra session and responding. And unless you want to stay, you can leave.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Melissa, thank you for organizing the group to come. Did we lose any of our members just now? 1, 2, 3.
I don't think so. Lee was on earlier, but I think she dropped out.
Okay. And Hella, 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay. So the two items, just in terms of our hopeful schedule, once we get through the discussion today, Sarah has already started a draft of the report, which captured the discussion you had last week on FY26 and have some comments in waiting for some further explanation or expansion. Melissa has provided us with the spreadsheet, and showing how things changed when a decision was made or recommendation. So we're going to be putting in spreadsheets, detailed spreadsheets to show, rather than just a summary, to show where things that we'll figure out how to do it, what was proposed versus what we came up with, because I think it'll help both the town manager, but others see what we were recommending. So today, the pieces were, and Sarah, I'm going, all of you that were last week's meeting can chime in, but on out years, my understanding of the minutes were people didn't want to talk about them that much, but I had several things to flag that I saw, and it's not so much a recommend a change in them, is a questioning them. And I'll just read off, and Bob, your hand's up and Sarah's hand is up. So before I go into my list, I'll get both of you to tell me what I don't know about last week.
Well, one of the things that came up in last week or last week or whatever, our previous meeting, the discussion was whether we could increase DPW budget for traffic calming measures. And for example, one of the citizen requests was to redo Station Road leading down to the rail trail. And a person just wrote to me saying, can we reduce that to just a traffic calming request? So I think we should think about whether or not we can afford to increase DPW's budget for traffic calming. I don't know where that discussion left off. I know we had a discussion, but I don't know that we got to a final decision on that. So
Sarah has it as a sentence.
Yeah,
She doesn't,
well-
she'll know what she wrote, but.
I know what I wrote. I thought I know what we decided, although nothing's final until, we all.
Do you all want me to put the spreadsheet up?
Well-
Or have you made other changes to it so I don't have the most recent
wasn't
ones?
No, I
So
haven't,
my-
I haven't touched the spreadsheet, but I just wanted to say, Kathy, we can talk about out years now if you want, but I don't think we have resolved all the decisions about the cash capital and the borrowing. We have to come to an agreement one way or another about this radio ask, about the 2 police vehicles, and about what we do, if anything, with any excess funds left on the table. Now, Bob, I believe that the group agreed to throw in another $50,000 for traffic calming. So that's what I put into the report. That doesn't mean we can't change it, but I think the minutes reflect that we had.
yeah, I think we
Yeah.
did, but I'm not sure that fully covered what Guilford had requested. 50,000 covers the Wildwood Cemetery
Or
crosswalk,
some of the other ones.
or some of the others, right?
Well, he wasn't requesting anything except some more money if we wanted him to do any of the resident requests.
I
So-
need to go get another piece of paper, so I'm not leaving the room for any other reason. I'm out of my piece of paper. I'll be back.
Okay, so I don't know if Kathy can hear us, but, and so what I'd put in the report, and again, we can revisit, is that we would add $50,000 to traffic calming and let DPW decide, based on kind of their sense of the priorities and the affordability and the ease of, which of those resident requests to
Right.
address. We talked about how we didn't feel we could actually decide which was most meritorious or important, and that really should be a departmental decision.
So can I just?
Yeah, go ahead. Over to you.
I'm just play back to you what I just heard in terms of if we write it as add 50,000, and here is a choice of 1 or 2 areas that we think should receive priority, it would be left to discretion, but I think it's good to at least mention them. Otherwise it goes into a big pot. And it gets spent for something called track farming that may or may not be the resident request. So I'm hearing that you got down to a few that seem like might be higher on the list. That's what I'm hearing. I'm not saying one
Well,
way.
I don't know that we said they were higher on the list. I hope the draft report indicates the ones we felt were traffic calming and thus could be
Right.
addressed by this extra
Okay.
money. DPW, you figure it out. But
Okay, so
we can
so it
be
was
more-
is in
yeah.
that category. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So I'm totally comfortable with that as a recommendation. So Bridget, we should do one at a time then, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. No, I concur with what Sarah said. I think that Guilford knew which of the projects were doable, which were not, which ones would eat up the whole budget. I think he said that whole extra 50,000 would be taken up by Wildwood, but some he might be able to knock off a certain amount. But moreover, he mentioned that he's got a queue. And so if we let a special request jump a queue, there might be some equity issues involved in that. So I think saying it the way that you said it makes a lot more sense than saying 1 or 2 specific projects.
And so that would take, you know, Melissa, in terms of spreadsheet, that would take what I saw happened last week is we ended up with a surplus. So that would take some of that surplus down and move it into a traffic calming line. And we'll write it as a recommendation to make it clear.
I think that the spreadsheet I sent you, I upped that line by 50,000 because that's how I understood the meeting to be
Okay,
going.
so that's already in there. Okay.
Yep.
Well, you know, a good way to display this would be to put another column in here, which is the original FY26 request, and then have a column in here that's this is what we recommend. Then you could see very quickly which lines changed.
Okay, and I can, you know, once we get through today, Melissa gave me the original a few weeks ago, you know, before we moved any money. So if we get to a new line, you know, I don't have to put you through it, Melissa. If, you know, if I get a revised one that time, I can do those two columns side by side. I
Okay.
think that makes a lot of sense. It'll be easy to see it then.
Yeah, that way you can see very easily what we changed.
And then what I saw, and Sarah, I shouldn't speak for you, but it was that you still left some additional money. And did that go to spending down debt service? Did that go to roads? Where did that go to, right? You know, to get it down to, we were trying to get to a balance rather than generate a surplus.
Yes, but where we left it, which we can, you know, we can continue, was that let the town manager decide. But if we think really we ought to be deciding, then we can decide.
So I think, given what we hear at the council regularly, is saying, give it to road repair would make some sense rather than, because the $500,000 on road is quite a bit below what we used to do. What we were trying to do, and everything else that I saw on the list was more expensive than the surplus that we have. It was down to a couple $100,000, you know. So I think that makes more sense. I mean, that's where I would go, but I'm only one voice on the committee. You know, we can leave it the way you just said, Sarah. Recommend that there's 200,000, put it where you think is the greatest need. Because Guilford had the mower, had the $250,000 vehicle that he reluctantly moved to next year.
I'd be happy to put it into road repair. You could put that to the group and see.
That would be my recommendation, that however this ends up being, that's where that money goes. But Bob, I'm seeing your hand is up.
Yeah, I could see it going towards road repair or to pay down debt. I think when I look at the chart that the town engineer putting an extra $200,000 into roads really it's just a drop in the bucket. It's not going to change anything.
Doesn't even buy a quarter of a mile, right?
I mean, it's a quarter mile, or it's somebody's front yard. I get it. I mean, there's potholes on Wildflower where I have to, maneuver around them when I go anywhere. So I understand, but
But Melissa, can I ask, is there debt that we can actually pay down?
These are two options for the town manager to think about.
So I just don't know, do we have debt that we can, I know with a home mortgage, with some mortgage, you can prepay it. Do we have debt we could pay down?
So our typical practice here in Amherst is to borrow short-term money while the project gets started. Like, so for instance, the chiller at PD that's a few years old, we funded that, and then at the end of the year, we're like, oh, we've spent half of it, so we will do a short-term borrow for the amount of money that the chiller has been spent in that fiscal year. And then just a few weeks ago in March, we renewed some of those short-term borrowings, and at that moment, short-term borrowings, they're 1-year notes, and so every year we have the opportunity to pay that down as much as we can or pay it off. And then when we go to do the balance of the project, we're only long-term borrowing for, 500,000 as opposed to 1 million. So that's our tactic as well, a project that isn't spent all at once, like a purchase of a vehicle where we spend $250,000 to buy this, fire truck or something like that. But a project that is phased over several months, we'll borrow a portion of the project in short-term borrowing, and sometimes even the whole project that way, if we think we can pay it down in 2 quick years or maybe even 3, so that we don't have to actually go out to long-term borrowing. And so and the short-term interest rates are typically significantly lower than long-term rates. So anytime that we have a project that's around $1 million, we try and just kind of, and if we have extra money budgeted in the debt. So we had done some forecasting, just for example, last year, we had done some forecasting for some debt that we didn't end up borrowing. The favorite library project. And so, because it was budgeted to pay debt on that project, and we didn't have to pay debt on that project, we reallocated those monies to pay off all the other general fund debt that we had, so that we weren't renewing that note to next year. So we might have only scheduled to pay $50,000 down on that debt, but we're like, hey, we have the whole 250 right now. Let's just pay the whole thing off and be done with it, so that we could save the town money, and then that money was available to do something else in this year.
Sarah, yeah.
Yeah, I actually think that we should put this money into capital projects. I think it would be, I would have a hard time explaining why, when our capital needs are so huge, we couldn't find anything to spend $270,000 on. I mean, really? Guilford will be mad, right? I mean, everybody, but that's ridiculous. Okay, so I think we should put it into roads. It can't not pay for anything. I mean, it's 50% more than what we're already getting them. So, but the more I think about it, the less I want to say, we don't know. Come on.
So
we're working hard to generate this money for capital projects. Let's put it.
That's what I came in thinking, what I had read too. But one way we could do this is we could put this one item to a vote on it, or we could say, is this a consensus? Because I would support just saying roads, put it into roads, that we could. And okay, so Bob is fine with this. Yes. So that will, between the.
Excuse me, do you want to poll anyone out? Do you want to poll the whole group about that?
Well, I can poll everyone. The only person who's silent right now is Hala, and then Bridget. So if I want to go around the room and get a yes, the question is yes or no to put the extra, which is in the 270 range, or whatever the exact number is. It all goes into roads. So Bob, and it's yes or no. Yes or no on this, Bob?
Yes.
Kathy's a yes. Sarah?
Yes.
Bridget?
I agreed with Bob's previous argument, and I also think it does pretty much cover the mower, and the sides of the roads were high last year. I could see where they had trouble, so I'll vote no, but I'm outvoted, so.
Okay, well, that's all right. No, Hala hasn't voted yet. Hala? If Hala's here. Hala?
I am, sorry
So
about that.
so I don't know whether you heard that the question is, are we putting all the extra money that hasn't been allocated yet into roads or not? So a yes is yes, roads. A no is, the alternative is leave it to the manager to decide roads or current debt. But right now, yes or no on roads.
Yes.
Okay, so, and I can put that in, Bridget, we can put it in our, the way we write it. It doesn't have to be that everyone's had put it into roads. We can say we had a discussion on also paying down the debt. So since the whole thing is just our recommendation, right? Yeah, we are, as much as we might want to be in the final decision,
You can
we're
ignore
not.
it all.
So does that get us through FY26, Sarah, and others who
Well,
are
I
there?
think we need to ask Bridget at least if she's now, if she's
Are you okay
with
on
respect
vehicles
to the
and on radios?
vehicles.
Well, I feel like on the radio, it's a done deal, and I didn't realize how much it was already baked into what you voted before, but also the argument was pretty convincing as to the reasoning. And for the vehicles, I could take the 2012, like split the difference, but I saw so many towns doing new hybrid vehicles for like 57K, you know, like it just seemed like we're asking for so much for that. Like, so I think with the vehicles, I'd be okay with one of them, but two seems like, honestly, the cleanest argument is if you're not doing vehicles for anyone, you're not doing it for anyone. Every other department also is racing to emergencies. It's hard. Didn't want to say it with the guys here because of course it's very convincing. You want to support them, but you want to support all the departments, you know, and we have 3 24/7 departments that are using their vehicles just as hard and racing
But
to
doesn't-
emergencies too.
Excuse me.
So
DPW and fire gets more emergency calls than EMT than police, and DPW gets the same number pretty much proportionally. So anyway, that's where my votes are at.
Okay, so I think, so the radio side, that's an okay. And then the question is, does anyone want to, they had asked for 4, they're down to 2. Does anyone want to go to something less? Sarah?
I will vote for 2 for several reasons. One, I don't think, you know, we certainly in school committee, we talk about equal and equity, and certainly in front of town council or at BCG, we've talked about, you know, it's everybody's needs aren't the same. So the police department's needs at this time are different from other departments' needs. So there's that. Also, I don't see how delaying of trying to do more vehicle purchase all at once is better than spreading them out when you can. So that doing 2 now is better than trying to do 2 next year along with a whole lot of vehicles for other departments. And then finally, I think it's tricky to compare costs across towns or cities because what we're being asked for is the fully loaded vehicle, like literally with all this expensive equipment. And Chief Ting, I think, or maybe one of the other gentlemen spoke about how some cities, they get the vehicle but then they have to spend even more money to outfit it. So I don't know that maybe the numbers Bridget has found are apples to apples, and maybe it's like half an apple and they have to go figure out how to pay for the other half of the apple, whereas we're paying for the whole apple.
Well, I'll comment last, but Bob, do you want to weigh in on this and how?
I hear what Bridget is saying, but I still think the police should get 2 cruisers this year. Because I do think that, you know, I've seen cruisers going up and down the streets and they're driving fast, a lot faster than even ambulances go. You know, I think there was a compelling argument that we need to make, you know, we need to err on the side of caution and replace them maybe more frequently than they need to be. But for public safety, I think I'm willing to do that.
Hala? And then I will do it a formal vote, Sarah, just so we don't, Hala?
Sure. I'm sorry if I missed a piece of this argument, but for some reason I think moving forward, the national government or federal won't have a problem funding the police. Looking toward not to be an alarmist or anything and talk about a militarist state or a police state, but I do see that is a priority they value differently than education and or other services that aren't, I don't want to like associate punitive, but just say like, so yeah, so this is a tricky one. And I might be leaning more towards the one vehicle at this moment. But, you know, my vote is one of many, so just,
So I will come in for two. I mean, particularly hearing, you know, we didn't buy any there were actually a 2-year period when we froze it, and hearing that Ford managed to change its car design so we can't transfer equipment from one car to another. I feel like Ford should have reserved an assembly line for police cars. You know, they can do whatever else they want with the Ford Explorer. I mean, if anyone's looked at what Toyota's been doing with the Prius, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's so you could see that a design, and so I think part of what we're seeing is that a fully loaded car is going to cost more. And what we heard is that 3 years from now, replacing that car won't be as expensive because you can transfer the equipment, unless they do it again, but you can transfer the equipment. And so I think it's important, since we cut them, they already were cut from 4 to 2, and to write a paragraph in our report that says there needs to be sort of a vehicle policy that's not just driven by departments, but driven by some knowledge of what's happening outside of Amherst, as well as what's happening inside Amherst. And we did, 2 years ago, we had the ladder truck, and our truck that we were buying was twice as expensive as the Northampton truck, and they were buying it in the same year. And it turned out that our truck came with water and their truck was just a ladder. And so they were sending 2 trucks when we were sending 1, and their fire trucks didn't need to go to as many places, you know. So there was an explanation on why one was twice as expensive, because they actually weren't the same. So I'm going to come down to keep it at the recommended, the 2 we got. And so I see Bridget's hand is up. So yes, go ahead, Bridget.
Well, I can count, so there's no need for a formal vote, but what I just wanted to say is that the charter requires that in the vehicle table, it includes a maintenance and repair history for each vehicle too. And tracking that year after year would actually, if we could mention that they do that, it would help us to have like a benchmarking thing that's not just like each of our personal opinions about. And it's really hard when the departments come in, you want to give them everything they ask for.
Yeah.
They're doing such hard and important work for the town, you know, but I also know, you know, my son worked for the DPW this summer, and he saved a baby's life racing to, you know, an incident.
Right.
And they're also doing the same things, and their vehicles are going a lot longer. So I don't want to personalize it. I want something.
Yeah, so that's a
You know,
very
a
good
measure.
discussion. We can add a short piece on inventory, where all we did last year is thank them for doing, this is a new thing for the town to even be giving us something with as much information as we're getting, but we can ask for, to the extent it can be easily updated. We've now at least got whether they're gas or hybrid, and the year they were purchased, and how many of them we have. And I have to tell you, 4 years ago, we didn't have even a list. You know, so we've moved from, there seem to be a lot of cars on some of the lots. So Sarah, I see your hand, and Bob.
Yeah,
hands,
just a
both of them.
comment about something that would help with, you know, a dispassionate vehicle replacement policy might include something like, you know, once the repairs, your annual repair, you're spending 10% of the current value of the vehicle on repairs, you know, or whatever the number is, but just something measurable about, you know, at this point, you should just get a new vehicle, right? Because you're just sinking too much money in it. Or something about if it's out of service for more than so many hours a month or something, then it's time. So I agree with Bridget. It's, you know, it would be helpful to have some more quantitative basis for deciding.
I see. So we'll try to craft sentences to that effect on
I
what we're looking
agree.
for. Yeah.
I think Bridget's brought up a really good point that we need to, as a town, develop a policy on vehicle replacement. I mean, it's too helter-skelter right now. And, you know, the council and the finance committee and JCPC, they all get kind of like get arguments, instead of facts, and we need to be more fact-based in terms of why we need to replace these after a certain point.
Okay, so we're staying with the 2 and we're putting a paragraph in on inventory that we appreciate getting the inventory we would like to have on vehicles, a vehicle policy. Well, what we'll try to do with Sarah's help is I'll try to write this up as a draft document and then people can respond to, the sentences didn't quite capture what we were saying, or, in terms of a word editing, and flag it as a recommendation. This isn't just going to be buried somewhere in the report.
Yeah, I think we should have, in terms of a overall summary, we should have a summary of recommendations.
Okay. Bob knows I really like doing that. So it's much easier when it's only 1 page long. But summary, yeah. And then we can get into the rest of the report gives you some why we said what we said, rather than you having to read a lot. So how are we doing on time? I'm just doing a time check. 3. So we're 2 to 4.
We got 40 minutes.
We have 40 minutes.
Out years
Okay.
and-
Okay, so on out years, if people want to hear my list, I can give you a list of things that I was questioning, not necessarily saying get rid of. And it's already in the draft, so I could remember what I was thinking about when I did it. So when I looked in out years, and I'm not going to do specific years for each, Puffer's Pond had 3.5 million in fiscal 27 and another 2 in 28, which there's just no way we're going to have enough money to do that. So questioning, doing some priority list on Puffer's Pond and doing grant raising was what I wasn't going to say, don't do Puffers, but between the beaches, the dredging, the repairing and more, it was huge. Facility, you all last week decided to stay with $1 million. Facility goes up to 1.5 and then to 2 in out years. And I was going to recommend staying at $1 million and let's see what $1 million got us, in terms of and part of this is because the nearer we can get to not giving a totally unbalanced out year, people are asking, are we going to have enough money to do DPW? And if we've got other things on the list that eat up all the money, the building will fall down on people's heads, is what's going to happen with DPW. Yeah. So that's part of the looking at this. So it was going to keep it at 1. Crocker Farm has placeholders, and I don't even know, Sarah and Bridget, where they came from. I mean, there's not bad placeholders. There's roof and there's HVAC. So what I was going to recommend is get good numbers on Crocker Farm, so we know the urgency, when, and just best guesses on them rather than have them as, and I know the facilities person is new at the school, so, take a look at those. And I see 2 hands just, Sarah's hand went up and Melissa's hand went up.
Just something about keeping facilities or anything else flat over the coming years. I think we're going to be slammed with inflation, rising pretty high inflation. So we'll get less for that same amount of money. So I wonder if you want to build in some, 10%.
Rather than a 50% increase. Yeah.
Right, but not zero, to zero.
So okay.
Yeah.
So Melissa, I see your hand is up, and I know they gave us a list that ended up with 10. If we wanted to do everything on the list, it was a lot more, but some of that wasn't prioritizing and what is critical. Melissa, I'm just looking for, that used to be 500,000 and it's, triple.
So first is that I just wanted to let you know that I have reached out to the school department about their long-term capital list, and they're doing a lot right now. So it's just not their priority to get back to me about what they're going to do for 3 years from now. So, I just want to acknowledge that, they're busy. I get it. And so that's why we don't have an answer. And maybe that's something that they can answer, in the summer when there's sort of a reprieve and they're resetting for next year. And then as far as the facilities capital, in fairness, they started at 2 this year, and you know, I know that that number is challenging, but part of where that comes from is that this committee or maybe the whole council, I'm not really sure, but someone had requested of the facilities department to do a full assessment, and they've now done that. And this is just what happened. You know what I mean? Like, you asked
Yeah.
us to find out if the sky is falling, and unfortunately the sky is falling. So, you know, I think that we'll probably have a very similar list when the new facilities team at the school does a full assessment of all of their buildings. We'll get a list that's just as challenging. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there. And then I was just looking at this spreadsheet again. And, you know, just to bring some doom and gloom to the conversation, I want to remind everyone that there are some projected debt numbers in here in the out years that include some of these big projects that we have coming down the pike, like the DPW. But in order to manage this in all of the scenarios that we had presented probably 6 months ago now, which now all have changed and are no longer valid, fully acknowledge that, but all of the scenarios that we are proposing was limiting the years. There are crunch years of about anywhere from 5 to 8 years where the cash capital amount was going to be $3 million. And the new projects number, which I believe is the capitals number, is kind of bouncing around 5 or 6. And so that's why you know, like, that's the problem, is that there was no way for me to sort of make it work without cutting what our normal investment in capital is for us buying things as far as borrowing things in half. And that's what creates a challenge. So just kind of know that when you do this, and you know, maybe you do cut facilities to $1 million each, but you should probably put another $1 million each in the school facilities, right? Because that's what's going to happen to them too. And then you're left with another $1 million to maybe buy a car or two. So there's going to be some really tight years. And I think that things have changed and evolved, you know, just in the short time that I've been here, where those projects are probably not as condensed as maybe I had hoped they'd be. I had a really ambitious project plan to get them moving now. And that delay will do 2 things. One, it makes it easier to sort of, it delays our short-term problem, you know, of those limited years. But it also, we run the risk of what inflation is going to do if we delay one of those major projects by 5 years. So I'm just putting out
Yeah.
all the good
Yeah,
news.
No, and that's partly where I was being harsh, Sarah, on hold it to $1 million, was thinking that Melissa had told us we're going to only have 3 million to spend once we start these other building, you know, and but you know, these were just ideas rather than I would be fine with, you know, increase the facility budget by 10% a year and let's see how far we get with it. You know, it's just that it goes up to 50% and 2 million. I'm just going to give you a few more. So you react. So Mill River and War Memorial Playgrounds, there was a beginning discussion on do we need a playground at all at War Memorial, with it's so near Kendrick Park that what's the need for it? So it was a question of, should we just remove it? And it's out here. And Mill River probably qualifies for CPA. You know, so I was looking for big number items. And in all of them, I flagged them as questioning them rather than saying eliminating them so that people's eyes could go to it. And then school buses, there was $400,000 every couple years. And when Shannon was with us, she thought that was put in before the leasing policy came up, Bridget and Sarah. So it was like, we're not on a buy a new electric bus every couple years. So it was just a question. Those were on, there are a few 400,000s coming up in this 5-year plan. And then vehicles just was a big question mark. You know, this, I have no idea what vehicles we really need, but vehicles, because we pushed everything off. So those were the big items. I was looking for $500,000 or more cost items. And those were the ones I came up with as big items. And Crocker Farm wasn't to question whether there's a need to do that, but just to know whether those numbers are accurate, you know, somewhere in the ballpark. And is the timing about right? You know, is the roof pretty good? Or is it about to spring a leak? And so the town's assessment didn't include Crocker. I'm not sure why, you know, but we could ask them. They've got this new way of looking at buildings to look at it. So that is my entire list on the 4 years worth of things where I just was looking at them for big ticket items. Sarah.
Yeah, well, I would remind you, because maybe it's already disappeared from the list, is the $6 million for the Southeast Street intersection. So
No, I think Melissa just subtracted it because I couldn't find it anymore on the list. But yes,
yeah,
I
so
had it.
that's a change. That's a change we've essentially already recommended. So
Right.
And also the Bang Center, that's another one that got a,
Yeah,
So Bangs was gone altogether, at least from this year. I don't know what we said.
I'm talking about the out years.
Yeah.
Right, but then
Yep.
I understand that a lot of the numbers you're talking about, they may not be accurate. They may not be ready to do in the years they're proposed to be done. But I feel like the major capital projects are the driver of the bottom lines. So it's like if something about that changes, it's like then all the problems go away because there's plenty of money. So I guess I would qualify any discussion about making changes to the littler stuff was, assuming that the big projects are going to be undertaking as shown in this table. But if those are canceled or moved or they get smaller or whatever, then anyway, you see where I'm going.
or bigger.
Yeah, there was that. You were asking if the numbers were accurate about Crocker Farm. Probably not.
No, and
not
I
to our
wasn't-
favor.
And I was definitely not removing those. It was just, I thought the
that's
word.
fine. I think they're old. We definitely need to revisit them. Okay, enough from me.
So this could be written as looking at out years, we're assuming that DPW is on the list, the big buildings are on the list. So we took a close look at these out years, and here's areas that we were at least raising questions about. We weren't necessarily saying what to do. And the town manager, this will be the first time in, I think, 3 years that it wasn't close to balanced. We never got the out years balanced. The first year of JCPC that I wasn't on had everything was pushed off from year 1 to year 2. So year 2 was $7 million not balanced. And I didn't understand how you could have a capital plan for 5 years where only 1 year was balanced. So I said, could we get a little closer on the 5-year plan to have it look like a plan rather than
Maybe we should just took it like a 5-year outlook. It's not
a
a
5-year
it's an outlook.
So that was my list, and what I'm proposing, since we're on such a tight timeline, is people will get a draft by the end of Sunday, if I can, and Sarah will see it first to make sure I've captured things that you already discussed. And then everyone sends comments to me, and if they're all similar comments, then we get a revised draft, and I just collect the comments next week, so that everyone will get to weigh in on, is the wording right or not, and the summary, and so we can get it back to the town manager, who has to deliver a report a week or so after we've done this. But Melissa's on the team here, so he knows what we're talking about. So then the one other place we had that was new this year is if there is surplus free cash, which means other than the 5% we try to carry every year, do we have recommended priorities on where we would want to see it spent? And my list includes, the first one on my list is, should we have any idea of what the middle school roof and mold abatement costs? I would make it a number one for being in the receiving line for some of that. And 3 years ago, it was the track project, the regional track, and $1 million went from the surplus free cash to the track project to try to make it viable. So, I don't have a number on this, but I would make it. So I'm just going to throw them out as my list. My second would be, we just didn't do the southeast intersection by the school. If we have any idea of what we plan to do, it could be number two, on at least the design of it. And then I had roads as my third. So I only had three. I had 3 areas with a number 1, 2, and 3 being middle school roof. And that's a whole regional school issue. And I will say, within the confines of this committee, I'm fine with Amherst spending some money the way we did for with the track, where we just put some money into the pot. But there'll be other counselors that say we should be at the assessment method percentage, and we would be at 80% of whatever that would be. So those are the 3 I came up with when I was thinking about it. And Bob's hand is up and Sarah's hand is up.
Yeah, I think I would include some vehicles in that list, because I'm looking at the list and there's almost $2.7 million worth of vehicles in FY27, and we're not going to get all that. And one of that's a pumper truck, and I don't know what the schedule is for the pumper truck, but that's $850K. But I mean, there's a lot. You've got the police cars in there. You got this electric school bus, which may or may not be real, because we have a different policy now or a different system now. But we should
So
think
Bob,
about,
you would do it as vehicle, you would do it as a generic vehicles and then pick the critical area?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I would say that we can't. We've pushed vehicles into next year already, and so we can't keep pushing them into the next year, the next year, the next year. Sooner or later, they're going to break, and we have to replace them. So we should think about, if we have some extra money, we should think about what vehicles do we really need to replace sooner rather than later, recognizing too that it's going to get, all these things are going to get more expensive in the future. So if we have money now, let's spend it on where we need to. And I agree with your priorities, but I would put vehicles on that list.
Okay, and I had originally put the one Guilford argued for this year, but you're saying don't be specific. He had the something side motor, and I didn't understand why it wasn't a vehicle, but he had that 250.
Right.
So Sarah and Melissa both had their hands up on this.
You call on one of us.
Sarah,
Yeah,
and then
okay,
Melissa.
Thank you very much for thinking of the middle school. I think that would probably be a heavy lift, because if this is like appropriating free cash in the fall, there's no way to involve other towns. So it would really have to be a gift. And unlike the track project, there's no public benefit, right? It's not something, anyone in town can go walk around the track and use the facilities that this towns and CPAC monies are going into, but it's different from the roof. But that'd be great, it'd be worth a shot. But my other thought is that, I think all the Crocker Farm asks, whether the numbers are accurate or not, are for borrowing, except for a pretty expensive electrical service upgrade. So Bridget and I could try to find out. Well, I don't know that we can find out in a week, you know, like whether the $51,000 for copiers or the $50,000 for HVAC, you know, if those are smaller, easier things perhaps to buy and not so expensive, but perhaps could be easily implemented from free cash.
So Sarah, just, I'm gonna play back to you and then call on Melissa. Would you write this that, you know, I did think the one argument I thought on middle school as a public benefit, not just the middle school, is that it's a heavily used recreation facility. You know, when we had the aquatics people come in and say, we all use the pool, we all use those basketball courts, we use them for the summer programs, we use them for after school and this terrific movement program that's been going on, you know, so that building actually more than the high school gets used for
Sure.
community activities. There's an active pickleball player group that plays there on Sundays.
Can I
But,
ask, maybe
you know,
Bridget, maybe Bridget remembers that what's envisioned for roof work at the middle school is not for the entire roof. So I don't recall which parts of
Okay.
the roof are not, you know, like are not part of the program. So
Okay.
so maybe what you're thinking of would be covered literally by the roof, but maybe not. I just don't recall. Maybe. I
No,
don't know.
and I'm fine with, and I didn't not say Crocker, because I agree, Crocker had a bunch of things that were smaller, and so I thought of, you know, it either wasn't ready or they weren't as urgent. You know, I am trying to think of urgent things. The use of free cash should be things that we feel like can't wait for the next joint capital piece. But so Melissa and then Bridget responding to this, you know,
So
if there's free,
yeah. So I was just gonna say, I think Bob got to it, was that the reason that 27 is so high is that I put every request for a vehicle into 27. Like that, so the reason it's so high in 27 is that all the requests this year's that were, the only one that was like actually reduced or removed is the fact that the police vehicle has been 360 every year, and now, you know, like, so I didn't put an additional 180 in their out year. I just cut it in half. But so a lot of the pickup trucks and the in DPW, like some of those were this year along with that mower, and they were all just sort of just shoved 1 year out, you know, when we were making the decision to sort of make other things a priority other than vehicles this year. So that's why. And then I don't know, you said something earlier that, oh, I was also going to say that you guys had talked about, when you were talking about Crocker Farm and the borrowing, it's always my preference, if we can, if there's an opportunity where we can pay cash for something rather than borrow for it, we save an enormous amount of money. So like maybe when there's a free cash option and you have something coming up in the future year that was a borrowing, you can say, rather than borrow for the Crocker Farm $500,000 or something, we would like that to be cash capital paid for by this free cash. You know what I mean? Like something like that.
no, that would be great, you know. So Bridget, I like that addition a lot, you know, especially since the fiscal year FY 26 has just started, and then some of the other things haven't happened yet, you know, because there's been a delay. So Bridget.
I was just gonna say that I concur with the middle school roof. I think it's an emergency situation. You know, the tiles are falling and hitting people and there's mold and issues there. But one thing is with the MSBA grant is that the parts that the public use the most aren't included in that allocation as the way it's designed right now, including the parts for Amherst Rec and the auditorium. And so it may just make the most sense to try and do it all at once. So I just am saying, like, let's keep that top of the list. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is that, well, we can't go to the other towns. with the track in the fall. With the track, we waited, and when we went to them, they're all coming through with their CPA or with their town meeting portions. So in the end, everybody will pay their part. It just is, you know, a timeline issue.
So my list, the expanded list is middle school roof mold, you know, if we're ready to do something on it. Crocker, if there is something high on the urgent list for Crocker, southeast intersection, and I'm reading them off, not necessarily in the priority order, we could shift them. Vehicles, something from the vehicle list, whichever is the most urgent. Pay down, something we were gonna do with debt, use cash, and roads. You know, where roads is always the easiest, so I would make it the last because it's easy, you know, it's just, you don't have to make choices. If you have another 100,000, just throw it into roads. And who knows, the state might come through with our regular request that they're underpaying us for roads. So Bob.
Yeah, I want to just echo what Bridget talked about, doing the roof. I mean, the facilities guys told us that doing a roof piecemeal winds up costing more because you have mobilization costs for the contractor. You know, you have to pay it 2 times, 3 times rather than once. And so I think if we're going to redo the roof of the middle school, we ought to do it. You know, we ought to figure out how much it costs and where the money's going to come from and get it done.
Okay, so you all, when I draft whatever these sentences, you can make sure they mirror what you know about the, you know, this is the first time I've heard that the roof part you would be doing wouldn't be over what I'm talking about, the larger, so we can frame it in a way that it's to the larger community's benefit. And Sarah's hand is up and Melissa's hand is up.
Yeah, well, at the risk of making the list so long that it's not really useful, I feel bad for Guilford and his roadside mower. Like, I know that was pushed off. I think we heard about it though, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
just-
asked him to talk about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I could do a
nominate-
vehicle.
Could
so
even
you would-
have it in time to be, you know, used.
So Sarah, would you do in vehicles saying, you know, including roadside, you know, starting with roadside mower, you know,
No, I don't think it's,
It's
I don't think it's,
it
It
isn't-
wasn't even
it isn't
listed as a vehicle.
under vehicles. It's
It
It wasn't
under-
listed as a vehicle. I'm not
no,
sure
it's
why.
DPW equipment, Public Works. Highway,
So
highway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
highway equipment. So I would just put in a plug for that. I have no idea. What was it this year? Like $2 million? I don't remember what the total was.
It was
That allocated.
250. It was 250 for this mower piece.
No, I mean, last fall, when y'all appropriated free cash,
Well, a
capital
big
things.
chunk,
how much was
Well-
it total?
500.
no, there was over a
Wait,
million. There was
Yeah.
well over $1 million left after we put it into the capital reserve. We had 2 or 3 million that went into the capital stabilization fund. We didn't need to put in anything into general, and we didn't need anything for free cash. But there were 2 or 3 million. I've got the numbers probably underneath my hand over here, but
Yeah.
the council policy has been put a large amount into capital stabilization unless there are other urgent projects, you know, so this is an effort to say, you know, what else is there? And we won't know until October, maybe beginning of November. The closing out of the year is when we get certified free cash. And so we won't know what the number is. So none of these can have a number associated with it because we have no idea.
Right.
And then the way we have received it in the last few years was most of it went into capital and everything else went into roads. And we didn't have much discussion about it. This year we had discussion for the first time on did roads need that much, and was his sidewalk mower really broken? You know, so Bridget.
So I really support the Guilford's mower because it's a little bit like Russian roulette when the grass is really high and you've got to pull out. And then the second thing I wanted to mention is I've got a 4 o'clock meeting across campus, so I'm
Okay.
going to leave a few minutes early.
Okay, okay, so I'm gonna put vehicles as a category and start with sidewalk mower that seem to be on the list for this year, you know, unless something is more urgent, right? Because I don't remember, Melissa, whether that was the only mower we have, you know, with
There's a
the,
brush
with this,
mower too.
I don't know.
yeah,
There's a brush
So we-
mower, which we funded this year.
okay, so we have, it's 351 and we do have public. Unless we managed to outlast our public.
Yeah, they all left.
We've outlasted our public. So we can end on time, and then with my notes, which you don't even want to see what my notes look like right now, but with my notes, and then with what Sarah's already done. So Sarah, you know, it might make sense if you look at the FY26 where there were questions of where we went, and just work on just that section, or if you want me to take a stab at
I
it,
mean,
but I'll
what
try
I
to get
already did, revise.
what you already did. Yeah, what you already
Sure,
did.
sure.
You know, that whether we already answered some of the,
Yeah,
we think we're going there and phrasing it.
Right.
And then if you.
well, we don't have a live document, right? So. Like
I
I don't
didn't touch.
want. Okay,
I
so
didn't
don't touch it till I'll send it back tomorrow.
I didn't touch the document you sent
Okay.
me other than to read it.
Yeah,
I didn't touch it, you know, and so I saw what was, and everything that right now is in track changes mode. So I
Okay.
will, if you send that back, to the extent I work on it at all, I work on other sections completely. You know, I'll just pull them into another document.
Okay.
And so the goal will be to try to get a complete draft out by, you know, however quickly you can get me your piece, but I can work fast, and by Sunday night or Monday morning at the earliest, that people will see it as a group. And Melissa, I'll just send it to you to make sure our numbers are right, you know, that we're looking at the right final numbers on the things we did. And
Because
with the
we're meeting
Excel,
on Wednesday, right? We're
our
meeting
meeting is
5
on
days.
Wednesday. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm meeting on Wednesday. So that's why I said if we can get it back to everyone by Monday, there's enough time for people to send comments in. And so we can go over any questions if there are. I don't know whether we have wordsmith people in our team, but last year went very smoothly. 2 years ago, we had people who really cared whether I had 2 spaces after a period or 1 space after a period. You know, so I got
I don't care
edits.
which it is, but it ought to be consistent. I'll just say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you know, so it was like a level, and they came in later than everybody else's, so I had to go back and, you know, semicolon, you know, so it was changing, you know, since this is a recommendation, I've never been as compulsive about, you know, perfecting the spacing in it. The grammar should be accurate, so that. So in
numbers,
any
but
case,
on-
so
yeah.
that'll be the goal, to try to get it at the latest Monday morning, where you'll have, since it won't be a track change draft, it'll just be a draft. Because the track changes right now are on last year's and setting it up. And then we will meet and we'll finalize it. And if we can finalize it during the meeting, I will send it immediately to Paul. And then the council will see it the following month, whatever the next council meeting is. That'll be the
Meetings,
plan.
I believe.
Okay.
So
Maybe it's too late to ask this, but was anyone taking minutes?
I have a form of minutes, and there was.
Okay. I
No,
guess you took a
Hala,
minute.
there was actually, Hala was on the list for last week and that didn't happen, but I saw Nat did, and he did a really nice job. So, the answer is maybe not, and, you know, I have decent scroll, and we get the tape really quickly, so I don't want to push that on to anybody else, so, we'll
You could just send your notes or rough draft to me and I'll add if you like.
Okay, yeah, so that's what we'll do, you know, so Nat wasn't here, and Lee said she probably won't be able to make next week either. So it's a question, you you know, so at least the group of us were here and we can hopefully remember what we decided today. So
Well, we have the tape.
and the tape is great, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
so the minutes don't have to be as rich as they would otherwise be. So I am going to say that we can adjourn the meeting at 3:56 if everyone just, the four of us can, and Hala, can you indicate your agreement? Yes, Hala's
there
hand
she-
just went up. We have a unanimous agreement to adjourn at 3:56. And thank you, Melissa, for
Yeah.
staying with us and providing a lot of information that we wouldn't otherwise have. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
and thanks to the
Kathy, can I
police.
call you
fire.
after this meeting?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.